What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Harns, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are back, ready to turn the page on the 2022 college football season and get, fastly started. Fastly, it's a bad word. We're going to quickly started with the 2023 college football season as today, February 1st, National Signing Day. So we're going to talk some college football, recruiting, signing days in the books. I mean, everybody except like two players have a home now that are of note. So we're going to talk some winners and losers in this year's recruiting classes. Not just today, because today was pretty uneventful for early signing day is the signing day now. But we'll talk some recruiting winners and losers, some players we like, some good fits we like. But excited to get started on this 2023 college football season, Daniel.
Yeah, this is cool. It's tough because, like you said, the early signing day takes a little bit of the zing out of this signing day, but I think this one still serves a purpose because it is kind of the official page turn. I think you can make going to, the next season, because now at this point, this is at least on a national scale out of the way. Rosters are being finalized, that kind of thing. Scholarship counts are being, finished, and then you can look at spring ball, what to expect from certain guys, that kind of thing, and you kind of get in that mode. So got a lot of content coming here in the off season, but excited to jump in and look at some of these teams, what their classes are going to be.
Absolutely. Let's dive in. I mean, when we talk winners of recruiting this year, it's hard not to start with the third highest ranked class of all time. So let's go ahead and start with it. Surprise, Daniel. For the 10th time in 13 years, Alabama takes home the number one class without two coordinators. So it doesn't have an offensive or defensive coordinator, but doesn't matter because Nick Saban's still at Alabama. For those waiting on the downfall of Alabama, you might have to wait a bit longer because 9 5-stars is also a record for a class. So Bama doing Bama things. I mean, a 94.78 average player rating. I just wanted to highlight a few players that I love in this class, and I'm sure you have some stuff to talk about Bama as well. But, I mean, Caleb Downs, you and I got to see Caleb Downs in Mercedes-Benz Stadium beginning of the high school season last year. I mean, dude's a freak. If there was ever a player that was built for, a Nick Saban, Kirby Smart defense, it was Caleb Downs, and those were his final two schools. So Saban wins this round.
He is as advertised. My goodness.
Offense too. It's one of those, if you ever go to a high school game, and I encourage you to, and you go see a 5-star player, like a top 5 player in the country, it will be obvious. If you just go to the game and say, I know there's a 5-star player here, I don't know who it is, and you just want to watch, if there's a 5-star, that you will notice immediately when they're on the field. He popped. This is as good as an edge class, I think, as and we'll see how they pan out, but on paper, as good as the Will Anderson, Dallas Turner class as far as pass rushers go. I think Quay Rashawn and Keon Keeley are those dudes, capital D dudes. So, man, this Bama class is really good. I mean, Caden Proctor, you get to flip from Iowa. What else sticks out to you as far as this Bama class goes?
I mean, they took 2 quarterbacks this year, Eli Holstein as well as Dylan Lonergan. I know that there's going to be a lot of questions about quarterback this year, so I guess it's nice to have as many in the room as possible. Justice Haynes coming in at running back is big time. He was thought to be a Georgia, because he's a Georgia legacy, he was thought to be a Georgia lean for a long time. Commits to Alabama, does not waver. He just heard what he needed to hear. And I think it's been, a minute since Alabama had just a dominant tailback. Najee Harris was very, very good 2020. But before 2020, Jacob, Najee Harris kind of had a middling, I mean, you could call it above average, but he was a 5-star all everything running back. And he didn't really live up to it. Obviously, go before that, it was Derrick Henry, and he's been phenomenal and everything like that. But the guys that you look at since that time, the Trace Sanders didn't really work out. Brian Robinson had his year, things like that. They'll have their moments, but I feel like Justice Haynes has the opportunity to be that next like elite of elite running back at Alabama and maybe make a big name for himself. So I think he's got NFL future. So yeah, excited about him.
Absolutely. I mean, we could sit here and probably talk for an hour breaking down every player in this class for Alabama. Nine
Right.
5-stars, 25 total commits, I think it was 28 total
28.
commits. Um, only one 3-star. Again, a 94.78 average player rating. It's an insane class. Bama's not going anywhere. And this is not A&M just taking as many highly rated guys as possible, hoping they work out. This is Bama. They know what they're doing. If they're taking guys, it's because they feel like it's a good fit at Alabama. So,
And I didn't even think about the point you made. I mean, about them not having a coordinator right now, like offense and
neither.
defense. I know that to be true, but I didn't factor it into this class because you don't look at Alabama and expect it to be a coordinator. It's always Saban got his guys. Saban brings in whoever. Uh, that that can't be done almost anywhere else. I mean, that's
I don't think anywhere else.
that's just
Um,
crazy because you have to have a lot of cachet to say, I don't know who our offensive coordinator is going to be, but I know it'll work. And I don't know who our defensive coordinator is going to be, but you don't have to worry about that. It'll work. And that's basically what he's telling these guys as he's bringing them in.
yeah, and Josh Pate said this on his show that people into the program have said that Saban is recruiting as hard as he ever has in his career for this class, and that's evident given what they hauled in. So great class for Alabama. I'm in a positive mood. Let's highlight another winner. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go next?
Might as well go to the only other team that had average rating of above 94. Let's go to number 2, Georgia. Um, Great class. If not for Alabama, this is deserving of a number 1 ranking um, as far as how classes are built. But yeah, there's a lot of edge talent. They got Damon Wilson, and then Sam Pemba, Gabe Harris, just a bunch of edge guys.
Which they need right now.
Missed on the quarterback. I think they put all their eggs in the Arch Manning basket. So that's probably the biggest glaring thing. They knew what they had coming back, though. So I think it was a calculated risk. They said it's Arch or nothing. And they went all in on Arch. Didn't get him. They knew that they could go in the next class and get somebody just because I think they felt confident all 3 of their quarterbacks behind Stetson were going to come back. So that's probably the only big miss. A couple of the guys we highlighted in Alabama's class were also some of Georgia's top targets that were not. But they got 5-stars. I mean, 5-star offensive tackle. Stop me if you've heard that before under Kirby Smart. 5-star safety. This just rinse repeat for Kirby Smart with bringing in Jonel Aguero. And then I mean for Georgia, 3 inside linebackers that are just I mean 3, I think it's 3 of the top 5 in the country for that specific position. But Raylan Wilson being, a 5-star, big time inside backer, and then Jordan Hall is a defensive lineman that really popped at the All-American games. So I think that more of the same. Georgia's going to have just a big influx of more talent. They're not, they're not going anywhere by any stretch of the imagination. So they're going to be just fine as they will probably send several to the NFL again. They're going to, replenish right away. If they lose any, losing people in the transfer portal, not going to be a problem. I guess one thing I did want to mention, you know, Georgia thought to have the greatest tight end room ever this past season. I think part of that was Eric Gilbert being in there, even though he didn't really contribute this year. He did have a touchdown catch, but it was in mop up duty. He transfers out. Darnell Washington goes pro. A couple of the backup guys who just played sparingly that were program guys, they transfer out. Brett Seither and Rylan Goody, they go find other homes. So you still have Oscar Delp, who everybody was excited about for Georgia. But something that looked like a position of strength. Oh, and I didn't mention Brock Bowers, the best tight end of all of them.
The
Excuse me
Mackey
for
Award winner. Yeah.
I am sorry. I'm sorry. So he's going to go into his junior year. Oscar Delp will be a sophomore. So Georgia could still run their two tight end with two elite guys. They bring in two elite guys with Lawson Lucky and Pierce Spurlin, who is the number 2 tight end in this class. Georgia rumored to be in on Deuce Robinson if he does not choose baseball. So that would be crazy. You see the rich getting richer with getting these two tight ends. I would almost call it a need, though, with what they lost, whether transfer portal or they got, because 3 transfer portal guys and 1 off to the NFL. All of a sudden, this deep room seems a little thin. So, in influx of some more talent, Kirby, his philosophy is just keep recruiting guys because in this era with NIL and the transfer portal, you're going to lose it one way or the other. So you got to keep bringing in guys to fill out the 85.
Yeah, in Georgia too. I'll just highlight that transfer wise, I don't think they took any transfers in last cycle. They did take 3 this cycle, and with programs like Alabama, Georgia, like you're taking if you want to transfer, you're going to get your pick of the litter. And Georgia, a position of need, they looked internally and said, "Hey, wide receiver, they went and got 2 of the top wide receivers from in their own conference, including the SEC's leading wide receiver, Dominic Lovett out of Missouri. You also got Smoke Bowie, who's from Georgia, was a part of A&M's class last year. He transfers back in as a corner safety. We'll see which one he plays. But again, kind of handpicked a few transfers there. Great class for Georgia. This is their second highest average player rating ever in a class, only behind their number 1 rated 2018 class. So, I mean, again, if you're sick of Bama and Georgia, sorry. it's another, it would be a number 1 class a lot of years for Georgia. Here they are, number 2, but incredible class for Georgia and Alabama. They're definitely 2 winners of this recruiting cycle. Daniel, let's talk about a loser. I want to hit this one because you want to talk about them as a winner as well. So Clemson. Here's what I'm going to call a loser relative to expectation, because
Right.
I think generally the past few years, people have thrown around the top recruiting schools like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and they're just kind of thrown in there in that grouping. And I kind of scratched my head, did a little deep dive today, because it seemed like Clemson being an elite recruiter happened a couple times, and that was the outlier. And that's absolutely true. So the class of 2020 was their highest ranked recruiting class ever. It was ranked 3rd. The class of 2021 was their second highest rated recruiting class ever. That was ranked 5th. Again, for comparison, like Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama have been in the top 3 for like the last 8 years in a row. So it's like, anyway, then they follow that up with 2022 being the number 10 ranked class, this year being the number 11th ranked class. So not only are you going backwards, their lowest ranked class since their 2017 class that was ranked 16th. Their average class ranking in I'll just say the playoff era. Now we've gotten almost a decade. So in the playoff era, their average recruiting ranking is only 9th. Even during the best run in program history, they've barely averaged a top 10 class. Clemson had 2 transcendent, we talked about this. They had 2 transcendent quarterbacks back to back. You had Deshaun Watson, then you had Trevor Lawrence, the greatest quarterback in program history. You're talking a top 10 recruit all time Like, this is not just a 5-star. This is a top 10 recruit all-time
He's a
quarterback.
1-1. He's first
He's one of
overall.
one.
Yeah.
Clemson has to do better in recruiting if they want to keep themselves in the tier 1 conversation. This class has an average player rating. Sorry, I had it pulled up, of 90.78. And for comparison, being 4 points off the top classes in average player rating is a lot. Like, again, it's the gap between tier 1 and tier 2 is a lot. That's great if you're trying to compete against the ACC, which they are. It's not great if you're trying to put yourself in the conversation of Alabama and Georgia. So I say a loser relative to expectation because I think to the casual fan and to Clemson fans, you put yourself in the same conversation as yes, there's Bama and Georgia and there's Clemson. Like, we've also won 2 titles in the playoff era. Recruiting does not reflect that. And I don't know if that's an internal thing with Dabo of he's just going to keep doing things his way. And I'll say an encouraging thing, firing your offensive coordinator and hiring Garrett Riley. That to me was very encouraging if Dabo is not just going to be stubborn.
Right.
But you got to do better in recruiting. 11 at Clemson now is not good enough for what they want. So that's why I would consider Clemson a loser. I know you mentioned pre-show. You want to highlight them. So I'll be the bad cop. You be good cop.
No, and I think that it's important that, obviously we're given these grades and stuff like this. This is going to be oversaid about you're not going to know this until 3 years from now or 2 years from now. Well, let me start by saying in this day and age, you better know right away because of the transfer portal and everything like that. You better know if you've got some dudes. That being said, I was actually encouraged by some of this. Now, I will say the makeup of this class it gave me some worry at first because there's not a lot of skill guys. At least that's what was highlighted on some of the shows I saw. And then I started looking into it and I said, you know what? Clemson can recruit some defensive linemen. That's something that they've always been able to do. Their top 4 players are defensive linemen, or 4 out of their top 5. So basically, rinse and repeat that. So if you think Clemson's D line's going somewhere, it's not. Something I was encouraged by, Jacob, is that they have 3 top 300 offensive linemen that are all over 6'5" and over 300 pounds. This is something that they have not been doing in this era, Jacob. Not just so that, I agree with what you're saying as far as their recruiting. If you're talking about holistically, they pick and choose. Dabo's very selective. I'm just glad for their sake. I mean, a 4-star guard, Harris Sewell from Odessa, Texas. Yes, Permian High School. Yes, Friday Night Lights, same high school. Also getting Zechariah Owens, who somehow is a 4-star offensive tackle at 365 pounds, 6'6". I think that sounds more like a guard at that weight. He might lose weight. And then they also have Ian Reed from Vandergrift, from Austin, Texas, Vandergrift High School, 4-star. So those guys, my biggest thing, it may not be this year that you see the fruits of this class, specifically those guys. But here in the next couple of years, you'll see it start to make a turn for them to get dominant again. They've got to keep at it, though. This offensive line, something, Jacob, you and I have put on like the spotlight for the past 3 years, even in Trevor Lawrence's last year there. The offensive line was not good. Trevor and Etienne, they overcame a subpar offensive line. They had good offensive linemen, sprinkled throughout those days, that they had Deshaun Watson and everything like this. They're good program guys. They got to get to recruiting because there's a finite number of these offensive linemen out there. And if you let Georgia get 10 of them a class, which I'm exaggerating, but Georgia's got guys on guys on guys. Ohio State's got, tackles for days. Alabama, Texas is getting in on this too. And if you don't look up quick and start to get some of these offensive linemen, and that's the big thing for me. If you can start getting some of these offensive linemen, they've always been able to get skill guys, corners, and D linemen. I'm not worried about that with Clemson. They got to get these offensive linemen.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a couple receivers in here. I'm worried that they don't have a 5-star receiver. They need to start getting back to that. If I could pick a couple things for Clemson to do, it'd be this offensive line class so far. and then add a 5-star receiver or a high-rated 4-star receiver. Uh, Specifically, I'm talking about Clemson, because for them to get back to what they want to do, I don't see uh, Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, all these guys, Justin Ross. They need a guy like that, T. Higgins. They need someone who can be dependable. So, anyways.
No, that's really good points about Clemson. You mentioned a school I want to go to next, since you mentioned him, a school that has recruited offensive line very well. That's Texas.
Yes.
Texas had the highest ranked offensive line class in the country last cycle. They followed it up with another great offensive line class, not quite the highest ranked one in the country this cycle, but another great offensive line class full of blue chips. And and by the way, you add Arch Manning, the number one player in the country at quarterback,
Throw him in there.
who he's one of these guys who a bunch of people wanted to play with. And here Texas is landing a number 3 overall class in this cycle. This is a class that, going back through the last 4 cycles, so I'm thinking what's on the roster right now. Class of 2020 was ranked 8th, 21 was ranked 15th. And then Sark's first 2 classes, top 5 class, 5th last year, 3rd this year. You have 2 quarterbacks who are in the top 20 recruits of all time on your roster right now, and Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. So one of them is going to work. Surprise. You bring 4 5-stars, Anthony Hill, a linebacker. They desperately need speed in the linebacker position. Jonte Cook, a 5-star wide receiver. Cedric Baxter, a 5-star running back. Sark's going to have plenty of guys to play with this offense. And then transfer-wise, and you bring in A.D. Mitchell from Georgia. You bring in a safety from Arkansas, Jalen Catalon. This is a phenomenal class by Texas, and this is exactly what Texas needs to start stacking to have success in the future, and I'd even say the near future. You start building offensive lines like this, and you've got healthy quarterbacks who obviously have arm talent sitting back there throwing to highly rated skill players. Texas, this is a class I'm excited about if I'm a Longhorn fan.
They, I mean, Texas is the type of place that you can just fill everything up with, go pick up everybody in the state of Texas. You don't have to leave the state usually. Obviously, Arch Manning from Louisiana, that's pretty close. That's not national recruiting, but they got guys from California, from Hawaii, from New Jersey. I mean, this is like Sark understands that, yes, he needs to take care of the state of Texas. And that's obviously going to be job one. But going and cherry picking these guys, like his number 1 player, obviously Arch Manning from Louisiana, Sadir Mitchell from New Jersey. I mean, they're, getting a guy from Utah that just, I think it's important to go cherry pick those guys to round out your class and not just rely on getting another, 3-star, 4-star guy from Texas. Go get a 5-star, go get a whoever. Not that they're looking at rankings, but I'm saying go get the best player possible. You don't have to settle for a guy in state that you're going to try to develop. That's not the name of the game anymore. So Texas looks like they are well equipped for this new age of recruiting.
Let's go across the border, because another phenomenal class. Oklahoma, Daniel. Oklahoma ranked the number 4 class overall this cycle. And again, just looking at their last 4 cycles, 13th in 2020, 10th in 21, 8th last year, Brent Venables' first class, 4th this year, highlighted by who Steve Wiltfong has called the best quarterback in this class, in his opinion, and Jackson Arnold. And his reasoning being Jackson Arnold played at the highest level of football in the country and won, and did so. I think his touchdown to interception ratio is like 32-2 or something like that his senior year. This is a guy who won the Elite 11 this year in Jackson Arnold. So Oklahoma locked him down as well. A lot of schools came after him late trying to flip him. And then I'll say too, you look at their other top players in the class, and I'm going to butcher this name, Daniel. Adepuju Adebayor. I heard it said once today.
Hey,
I
that's
really
pretty
tried.
close.
5-star edge rusher, Peyton Bowen, 5-star safety. And again, you want to see Venables putting his stamp on the program. 7 of their top 10 players are defensive players on the other side of the ball. You pair that with some good skill players already on the roster in this class. It's something we haven't talked about, and I think it's important to know with recruiting. Something the recruiting experts, and I would not consider myself an expert, these are the scouts, will say, is that player rating matters a lot more on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm,
Tools and what you see, and that's what a lot of these ratings are built off of, like tools plus production. Like, it is hard to scheme a defensive player up to success. The reason some offensive players go under the radar is a lot of offensive scheme. Like, if you're a 3-star receiver, but you're fast and I'm an offensive coordinator, I can scheme you open if you've got good
mm.
hands. Defensively, it's a lot of, can you beat the guy in front of you? And so, really important in recruiting that you get highly rated defensive players and develop your offensive players. It's great when you get both, Alabama, Georgia. But so again, I just want to highlight Venables, defensive minded coach, a great defensive coach. 7 of his top 10 players in this class being defensive players. I just think that's a really big deal, knowing what Venables wants his identity of the program to be.
Yeah, Goyer High School getting absolutely rated in Denton, Texas for both Jackson Arnold as well as Peyton Bowen.
Yep.
That's awesome. Getting both those guys from the same school and them being 2 of your top 3 rated guys, both 5 stars, one on offense, one on defense. I mean, yeah, this is a strong class. I think exactly everything you said as far as the defense goes. And isn't it kind of interesting foreshadowing, Jacob, that top 2 classes are Georgia and Alabama. Next 2 are Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC soon. Seems like they're getting ready for the SEC.
So Alabama had 9 5-stars in this class. That is more 5-stars than the Big Ten had in the last 2 classes combined. It just means more. Daniel, what's a school you want to highlight?
Well, let's talk LSU for a second. So I promise you guys this year I'm not going to be all over LSU again. And the reason being is the reason I was all over them last year was because I felt like they weren't getting the respect they needed because I knew they were going to bounce back. They did bounce back, not quite all the way that I said. I said 10-2 regular season. They went 9-3, but they did beat Alabama and they made the SEC championship game. So a couple things that I didn't expect that they overachieved ended up with 10 wins when you count the bowl game. Dominant bowl game win. I mean, they are doing after last year. And so I'm doing this starting with talking about last year. Last year, bringing in the likes of Will Campbell, offensive tackle, highly rated 4-star, 5-star, depends on what service you look at. And then Emory Jones, said to be a guard. That was a lie. He started at right tackle all year. So they had bookend tackles that were true freshmen last year. Jacob, what's the best thing to do when you have bookend tackles?
Get more of
Recruit
them.
another one. Yeah, bring in someone else. So from the same high school that, oh gosh, I already forgot his name. Um,
Well, Campbell.
Will Campbell, sorry. I'm flipping back and forth. From the
You're
same high
good.
school Will Campbell is from, 5-star offensive tackle Zalance Hurd comes in. Both of them from Neville and Monroe, Louisiana. That high school had to have been ridiculous with those 2 guys on the offensive line for 3 years together. But that being said, he's coming in, and he might be the guy that knocks Emory Jones back to his natural guard position. I mean, he might not, but the fact that they're stacking offensive tackles tells me that they're on the right track. You mentioned before the show how they're the number 1 rated transfer class. They're
Yeah.
number 6 rated regular, high school class coming in. I mean, these are some guys. Shelton Sampson coming in at receiver. They've got some very, very talented players coming in this class. Deshaun Womack, huge edge guy. Expect him to make a big impact. But LSU's already good. They've already got a good culture. It's already turned around in year one. They're going to have to fight off they think they can beat Alabama every year. They need to stay hungry. But I think that Brian Kelly is the guy for the job. He's already shown that. The guys he's already prioritized in recruiting tells me that they're well on their way to continue this. Oh, and for one of the schools that considers themselves DBU, they didn't really seem like DBU last year at corner. They were very, just in general, defensive back took a step down from what we're used to seeing in Baton Rouge. They're bringing in a transfer class. The guys, I think that's the biggest thing. They're bringing in 4 corners in the transfer class alone. A guy from J.K. Johnson from Ohio State, bringing in Omar. I mean, this is a
Chestnut
great
from Syracuse, underrated player. He played really, really well this past year.
Denver Harris from Texas A&M, just another one of those guys that's bailing on A&M. So yeah, Deuce Chestnut, like you mentioned, these are going to Zy Alexander. These guys are all going to come in and immediately raise the level of play. And it's not like we just brought in all these recruits. No, these are guys who've already played ball. They're just going to get on the same page. It might take a couple weeks. We're not talking about the year. It might take a couple weeks for them to gel, but they're all, that's going to be a big, big deal for LSU this season. I think you got to look at, they've got quarterback. We're going to get into the nitty gritty. I know we're just talking about classes, but this class stacking an offensive tackle from what they already did last year, what we're already expecting of them on already a good team. So we're talking relevant to what they do. And then this corner class, reestablishing them. They had a good front 7. They get Mason Smith back. He was injured. They had a good front 7 even without him, and now you get a good back end. I mean, LSU is going to be a problem for some folks. So, anyways, very excited about this class as well.
I don't believe you that you're not going to pick LSU to go 10-2 again.
I didn't say that.
Too excited,
I'm just not going to talk about them as much.
Okay.
Well, I'll probably still talk about them. I don't know. We've got some listeners in Louisiana, so gotta please constituents.
I want to end on a high note. I have 2 more winners, so let me get a loser out of the way here. I got 2 more losers, so
okay.
I want to end with my 2 winners. Again, relative to either expectation or where I think they should be is important for this one. Michigan. Michigan's last 4 recruiting cycles, 2020 10th, 2021 13th, 2022 9th, 2023 18th. So your worst class in 4 cycles. Here's the thing. Again, relative to expectation, you are coming off back-to-back Big Ten titles, back-to-back college football playoff appearances, back-to-back wins against Ohio State, and you can't crack the top 15, can't crack the top 10. You're Michigan. You're Michigan.
You're behind Auburn.
Who just and this to me is Harbaugh's continued flirtation with the NFL. He said last year it was not going to be an every offseason kind of thing. Well, we're one offseason after that, and it was.
We'll believe it when we see it. Yeah.
So, I think Harbaugh needs to not flirt with the NFL, and this wouldn't happen. You can't just say I'm a Michigan man and I'm here to stay, and then 2 off seasons in a row flirt with the NFL. You have to capitalize on the field success with recruiting. This is how, if you look back at Saban did it when he got to Alabama. The last decade has really been when we've tracked recruiting a lot more in depth. I think Kirby Smart's a great example of this. He capitalized on that 17 season when they overachieved and then got the number 1 class that next off season. So if you're Michigan, I'm just saying that 18th is not good enough when you're coming off of back-to-back wins against Ohio State, playoff appearances, and Big Ten championships. 18th is just not good enough. So Michigan, I will say, is a loser this recruiting cycle.
Especially when they're peers. Ohio State's at 5, they're always going to be in that top 5. And then Penn State is slotted where they normally are at 13. So that's really what they should be. I mean, they need to kind of keep Penn State at arm's length because if they're not careful. I mean, Penn State was a good team this year. They could go right back into being 9-3, 10-2.
For me, it's you're Michigan. Top 15 at the bare minimum should be the expectation every
Right.
year, regardless of on the field success. The fact that you have the on the field success, to me, you got to capitalize on that with a top 10 class at the minimum.
Right.
And you didn't. So I think that's just poor effort. And I think it's a direct effect of Harbaugh flirting with the NFL. So hopefully that goes away. Michigan can capitalize some more. But I will say for the 2023 cycle, relative to expectation, Michigan's a loser. Daniel, what other schools do you want to highlight?
I just have one more that I really need to highlight.
Okay.
And again, Jacob, if you've seen a theme so far, I'm talking about the offensive line.
Can I guess?
Guess it.
An offensive line class?
Offensive line class.
I won't take too long, I promise.
You're fine.
I'm going to guess.
I'll give you a hint. It's elite. So
thank you. Ducks?
No. Going with Miami.
Miami.
All right.
Oh yeah, that should.
Their top two classes. It's okay. Their top two players in the class are 5-star.
Sorry, I'm like they got
tackles.
2 5-star tackles. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, yes. Francis Mauioga and then Samson Akunlola. All right. I'm sorry. I don't know the name, but both of them are 6'5". One's 330, one's 305. One is from, IMG, the other guy from Massachusetts. So going national a little bit to get their guy. But Jacob, this is a big, big deal. I'm going to keep highlighting it. This is going to be they lose Zion Nelson to the NFL draft. He wasn't that great of an offensive lineman while he was there. And obviously, he actually was projected to go in the first round before this season. And then I would think that he's probably a late round pick at this point just because of the season that was had. Miami, among some other schools, have been severely lacking. Other schools in the state of Florida, I'll finish my thought, have been severely lacking on the offensive line for years now. And I just think that that's just the way these schools who are so close to all this skill talent and defensive line talent and all these guys, they don't have a lot of offensive linemen around them. They've got to go get these guys. So I think it's a huge, huge deal when you bring in bookend tackles, that could be, stalwarts, pillars that you build your team around for the next few years. Miami had a real awful year this year. I'm interested to see what they do at offensive coordinator, how they move forward. They fired Josh Gaddis, all that. But I do know that 2 solutions to the answer is 5-star tackles. So I'm on board with that. It's tough for a freshman to come in and do anything. But again, they're coming into the ACC. This isn't, a big, they're not coming in and playing SEC ball from day one. I think that they'll be fine. Whoever they, if they both end up starting. But it's definitely the right way to go. That's literally all I'm talking about in their class is the 2 5-star tackles. I looked at the rest of it. It looks good, looks solid. It looks like any other Miami class is what it looks like. What I'm not used to seeing is those 2 5-star offensive tackles at the top. So excited for that for them.
If 4 kids from IMG, that's what you should be doing at Miami.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mario Cristobal, I heard Steve Wiltfong of 24/7 Sports say that he's probably the hardest working recruiter head coach in the country, and that he rides his staff on recruiting probably harder than anyone else in the country, like long hours required. And he's getting it done with this class. They got to translate that to on the field success. Mm-hmm. But like you said, 2 5-star offensive tackles is a great place to start. So excited for that Miami class. Let's end with 2 classes that are the highest rated classes ever for that school. First, Utah. So Utah right now, and the 24/7 Sports composite is sitting at 21. They've got 20 total commits, 8 4-stars. This is their first ever top 25 class and their highest rated class ever. So Utah, huge gets. Congrats to Coach Whittingham. And again, I mean, their highest rated player is 2 offensive tackles. So
Yep.
that's right up your alley. The second one is South Carolina. South Carolina also has their highest rated class of all time. So Shane Beamer continues to make me eat my words. Not really. I didn't really, you know, I didn't think he was going to be fired or anything. I just, SEC East was all moving up, and I thought maybe they'll be average. But hey, he's working his butt off in recruiting. Highest rated class of all time, highlighted by, again, one of our few signing day commits today, Nicholas Harbor, 5-star athlete. This dude is a legitimate Olympic sprinter. He's listed as an athlete, but probably going to play tight end. So you want to talk about like a next freak at tight end? I would take a look at Nicholas Harbor at South Carolina. He wants to compete in the next Olympic Games for track. He's that good at track. The fact that he is 6'5", 225 and an Olympic sprinter,
Was it 10 to 800 I saw?
He's a freak. I mean, capital D dude. So congrats to Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, man. They made some buzz on signing day. I can't remember the other flip they had today. They had another signing today, but again, highest rated class ever for South Carolina. So Beamer's working his butt off in recruiting, and it's the results are coming. So I think South Carolina is doing exactly what they need to do to stay competitive in the SEC East. So big classes for South Carolina and Utah. Daniel, any other players or schools that you wanted to highlight as we wrap up this recruiting conversation?
Yeah, one of the biggest players to commit today, Jaden Rashada, committing to Arizona State, where his dad played. So interesting there. He, originally was committed to Florida, thought to have had this big NIL deal that falls through. He decommits and decides he's going to reopen things, and ends up going where it made the most sense probably for him to at Arizona State with the family ties and everything. But I actually see myself kind of going back and looking at this Florida class, and for what it is, it's a good class. If you look at average player rating, being up, I mean, they're in the upper echelon. They're 9204 for average player rating, which is a high number for being at number 14 in this class. But add in some players. They missed on the big names, so that's why they kind of have a black eye in the national scale. And you don't hear me taking it easy on Florida, but I just want to highlight this is a good class. They're bringing in athletes across the board. Trayon Webb, running back, Jacksonville, Florida. He's going to be really good. He was a 5-star at one point. He's back down to a 4-star. So they've got some guys underlying throughout this whole team. It does leave a little bit to the imagination of missing out on a quarterback like Jaden Rashada. They have Graham Mertz transferring in. It's no longer Mertz season. We're off the Mertz bandwagon, but he's probably going to be their starter just by necessity. They've got Kenyatta Goodwin, offensive tackle, transferring in from Kentucky, so they're high up on my list, of course, because offensive tackles, and same with Damian George from Alabama. But all that to be said, I think as a whole, I think this improves Florida in maybe the ways that people don't notice right off the bat. They don't have the flashy 5-star here, 5-star there. They got a bunch of 4-stars, a bunch of guys spread across a lot of different positions, some good transfers. And I think you see an improved level of play as a whole for the Florida team. You're going to have more depth across the board. I think the 2 deep is going to be stronger. I look for Florida to take a step up, even though they're going to take a big step back at quarterback this year from Anthony Richardson to whoever ends up playing, whether it be Graham Mertz or somebody else. So I look for Florida to be more competitive in general, and they're going to be in more games because of that realized talent elevation that they're going to see.
This season?
I don't think they're taking a huge step, Jacob. I'm saying I don't think you realize. I think this is a good class. This is
It's a good class
relative to what they've been doing. I like this class better than other classes. Again, it's missing those big key cornerstones you like to point to, like a quarterback or a big time running back or a big time wide out or something like that. They got some linebackers, some edge guys, some safeties, you know.
But you know what
So,
they're missing? What's the one thing you've highlighted all episode?
well, offensive line. That's what
And
I'm
they just
saying.
had 2 transfer out and 2 go to the draft. That's my one, like, I know we're not supposed to talk about the season yet, but I am selling stock on the 2023 version of Florida. Good class.
Well, that's what Kenyatta Goodwin coming in
That's a big deal.
from Kentucky.
He's freaking huge. He's
Yeah,
6'8", 3'4". Is that verified size? That's golly.
but
That's
I'm
freaking
saying they
huge.
get it's not a replacement for high school recruiting, and Billy Napier is going to have to learn that over the course. But this transfer portal is going to help him bringing in a couple of SEC caliber offensive linemen year two, but bringing them in this year, going to be able to raise their offensive line play, I think. But yeah, they've got to have guys in the pipeline, and that's not what they currently have.
So Dan Mullen, I'm not trying to crap on Florida. Dan Mullen was fired in part because he couldn't recruit. I'm just checking something here. Let's see. Yep. So far, Napier has not crossed Mullen's worst class yet. His best class is not better than Mullen's worst class so far. That's got to improve quickly, Billy Napier. I think they believe in him long term, though, and he is a program builder. I don't know what to say the program was when he got there, but 14 at Florida. We'll talk best jobs again this offseason. You and I think Florida is a top 5 job in the country. And therefore, I think recruiting the top 7 should be, top 10 should be expected. I think if Florida, you can be recruiting the top 5 every year. Like, there's no reason Oklahoma should be recruiting the top 5 and Florida not. But good class, could be better. Florida, enough Florida fans think could probably be better. Trying to think. Florida State has a phenomenal class. They're ranked 11th. Some great transfers. Auburn, Hugh Freeze flipped a couple guys on the early signing day, like Ken Lee. He's got the number 3 ranked portal class this offseason, number 12 recruiting class. That's a great class. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong year. Just kidding.
I was going to say Florida State ended at
no. Florida State's at 20.
They're at 20.
But their transfer class is ranked number 3 overall.
Yeah.
So their overall rank is 16th. Auburn, similar. They're ranked number 4 transfer class overall. So 17th overall in that class. Can Lee is a big flip on the early signing day. Let's see. Yeah, that wraps up my conversation, Daniel. Texas A&M at 15th. Oregon has a great class.
Keep an eye on the Georgia Tech transfer guys. Just throwing that out there. They got Haynes King in there from A&M, Christian Leary from Alabama. They've got some guys that will make a big difference at Georgia Tech.
If you're Georgia Tech, I don't know the answer to this. Where should you expect to recruit? Given everything you know about Tech, academics, all the other stuff.
If I was a Georgia Tech fan, I would expect us to be in the top 30. I don't think that's unrealistic for the amount of talent in the state of Georgia. If they're just picking up the scraps of what everybody's left behind and then maybe land a big recruit here or there, I think that puts you in the top 30 every year.
That's reasonable. That's reasonable.
I know the academics are going to be used as a crutch, but there's been years where other academic schools have been able to do it. So
it's true.
And Georgia Tech's had very good years in the past. Chan Gailey's last recruiting class, 2006, 2007, they had 4 5-stars in that class. They can do it. They just got, they're, as my cousin who went to Georgia Tech has said, They do have a business school, so they can recruit. I was like, what's that supposed to mean?
Not everybody's got to be an engineer, right?
You don't have to be an engineer to go to Georgia Tech. You can go to a business school. Our good friend Cole graduated that business school. So
That's right.
shout out.
Yeah, I think top 30 is plenty reasonable. I don't know. Given the talent in the state of Georgia, that's
enough room for 14 SEC teams. Okay, that's enough room for
14 Big Ten teams. Well,
I don't know about 14,
10.
but let's go 8 Big Ten teams. It's like
Texas and Oklahoma.
So 16
USC,
SEC
Oregon. Florida State, Miami. Who else should be up there? TCU should be up there, I think. Top 25. Hey, Texas Tech has a great class too, for what it's worth. That program's turning around in a hurry. That'll be a school to watch out for. Speaking of the Big 12, next week we'll be back talking some schedule releases. A couple conferences have done this right. They waited until late January, early February to release the schedules, and guess what? The world did not fall apart. So we're going to talk about them. The ACC, Big 12, both starting their divisionless schedule next year. And believe it or not, Big 12's actually got 14 teams now for probably one season. So that starts
Big 12
this year.
was already divisionless.
Yeah, sorry, new divisionless schedule.
But
they added
the 4 teams. ACC's is divisionless. So
Pac-12 also already started it, but now the schedule is not based on divisions like last year's was, because last year they still had the division schedule but got rid of divisions anyway. So we're going to talk ACC, Big 12, and Pac-12 schedule releases. Talk about who's got the hardest schedules, easiest paths, etc. This will be a fun season to do some conference previews because just top 2 teams.
right.
Can't wait. We're not far from every conference doing this. Once the shuffle settles from realignment, we're going to get this in other conferences. So excited to see that happen. But be sure to follow us on social at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That'll do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel.